Hey guys, my name is Reverend Phoenix, and this is Drawing the Human Figure from Your Mind, Lesson 8. So in the previous video, we had began to understand the power of studies, and we could begin to formulate what Da Vinci and Michelangelo was trying to do, and also teach us from their studies the statements that they were making. And we have found that in order for us to begin understanding our inventions, the invention of the human being, we have to invent very customized, personalized methods of understanding it. So in this lesson, we're going to now begin to understand the power of these discoveries that were made by these masters, and it's going to help us master our own invention and begin to appreciate what they had discovered for us. Okay, so on the right side, I'm just going to quickly just put down what we had stated. So we're going to work with side view of the head. So from the side view, we had stated that in order to make the chin, we can put a dot here and start to make the chin go down, and then start to make the simplified design of the human head. When we would have the spine, the collarbone, the nipples, and then the sternum, and then we would go down, not touching this dot, and go all the way back up. And this would give us like the basic design of the chest area. Okay, so now we're going to magnify this area here for the human head. So for our invention, here's now where we're going to have to state facts about how to create this invention, the side view of the head. Now we're creating it as it had never existed before. So the first rule is that we will say that, okay, when you magnify this, right, we're going to put down two dots here. So this is the height of the head. And we're going to state that you should, after you put down the two dots, you should divide this into two parts. Okay, and then it's okay to divide this in 4 parts for the head. So the next thing is that, so this is rule 1. Here's where we're going to start making our notes. So the rule 1 is make 4 parts. Okay. And now here the second is that we need to measure from the middle and state that we are going to now take the same height that we had and translate it so it looks like an X, right? So we draw one line here, and then we'll draw a horizontal line to signify the X. Okay, and then we will divide this in 4 parts. Okay, so now here we'll state that the invention, the design of the head is not a square. Okay, so right now this is giving us a square. So we need to come up with our first formula as to how do we determine the actual width of the skull. So here, when we create the skull, we're going to create it in the correct design, but to a simplified form. Okay, so to understand this, we are going to state that when you have divided the the horizontal line in 4 parts, if you divide this, the right side, let's say, in half, the width of this, okay, not the whole width of this, just the width of this, needs to be translated to both ends. So if you take this width and divide this now into another part, this little width has to be added here. So you can just eyeball this, add this here and add this here. So now this will begin to give you that slight rectangle that we've been looking for to create our invention. So here we'll do the same thing here. Go down, and then we will make this into a rectangle. So for this I'm obviously using a pencil, and later if we get time we'll outline it in pen. Okay, so now you have the rectangle. So obviously when you do that, these dots in here become automatically invalid because they're not placed right, because we increased the width. Okay, so we'll erase those and divide this again in the correct divisions. Now this gives us 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I put dots here. Okay, so now this gives us the plane, the formula for in order for us to fit the invention in this place. So these are our dimensions. Okay, so we divided in 4 parts, and 2 was to make a horizontal line, 4 parts, plus the half of a 4th part, the quarter. Okay, so we divided it in half, then we divided it again. So this was 1/4 of a 4th. Okay, so here's where we're now making these notes for. This is our study sheet that we're going to keep for our records. Okay, so now we need to we had stated that, yeah, if you were sketching in a simple form, in our original idea was to just mark the center here and start making the jawbone on an angle and start making the line here. So now we need to get serious about this, and this is where the elite thinking is going to now come in, because it's our invention. We're now going to need to understand this and make those decisions where it needs to become that thinking organic species. So for this, we will state that in order for us to make this jaw, we will not put it in the center, but we will take when we divide this lower section in half, when we divide this in half again, so going up 1/3 is the actual point where the jawbone will start. And if you check this mathematically, this is actually correct. If you lay out like a tracing paper on a skull and you start putting these rectangles and making these dots, you will see that this is actually quite correct. And I'm getting to why this is so though. Okay, so the next item is that we have the dot. Now we need to make that angle, right? And we need to determine how do we actually make that angle. Do we go here? Do we go here? Where do we go? Okay, so the formula for this, for the right coordinate, is you divide it in half. Make 2 triangles, okay? So you've got 2 triangles here. Make this a little darker. You can see it. And then once you have these 2 triangles, you're going to divide this in half like so. You don't have to go on this end. Just divide this one more time. So now this gives you 2 triangles. So it was 1, 2, and then again 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? Now we didn't have to do this, but I'm showing you something very extraordinary here. Now this is why Da Vinci went nuts about this when he actually started looking into this. So when you divide it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, basically what we did was we can now simplify this. We can state that once you have the center of these 2 points, if you divide this in half and divide it again, you will actually get the same point. So just to get to this point, we had to do this, right? So if you divide this in half and you take a line down, this line is the actual angle, the beginning of the angle for the jawbone. So here at this point we can now draw a line going down, right? And here is where the jaw will start to turn, and this is mathematically correct in real life. So when you now start to turn, you're not going to go all the way down here, because that's not how the jawbone is. It has a slight angle, right? So here we can state that here is the bottom of the jaw, and we will start to turn not from the actual dot, but like halfway through this we can now start turning and connecting it to the jaw. So this gives us that slight angle that we need for our invention to approach that organic look. So here's why Da Vinci is going nuts here now, right? Because when he started doing these formulas, he started to see that mathematically this was insane when he figured this out. So when he started measuring all over the actual skull in his drawings, he found that he could come up with these formulas and imprint them in his brain as to how the actual design of the human species is. And this is where he got into understanding the power of math, and he got into inventions, and he applied these mathematical formulas in his paintings. Like even in the Mona Lisa, he uses a very complicated mathematical grid to create the composition. So he found that math existed in life anyways. Okay, so for us this should be fascinating as to how this is allowing us to create the skull. Okay, so the next item is that we're going to now create the bottom, right? So we need to figure out where this is. So the formula for this is that if you take the width and you had divided it in half, right? And then if you now divide this in half and divide one more time up, so I took the top from here, divided, and then divided and divided again, I can get the actual bottom. Scientifically proven that it does go, the bottom of the skull does end up here. And we can just slightly draw this out. So now we need to figure out how do we get to this angle. I mean, how does this angle come to meet over here? So the formula for this is that if you divide this in half, right, this left coordinate, and make an x here, divide it in half again, and if you now take the divide this one more time and get the center of this and go down, this is the actual point. And if you make an angle here, so this is again giving the angle where you need to start turning. So now we can connect this, right? So we are now going this way, and this gave us this angle over here, right? So I drew this. This gave us the angle of where the bottom of the skull ends, and we can now start drawing it slightly here and just connecting. Okay, so the next item is, where does this line go here? So we can now state that when we see this point, the center point here, this should just automatically come over here. So this gives us the angle. So the next item is that we now need to figure out the top. Where does the top go? I mean, does it go here? Does it go here? And there's a, guess what, another formula for this also. We divide this in half. You can divide this in half, okay? And now if you divide this in half, really you just need to get the center for this. Once you get the center point for this, this tells you this is where the actual skull, the top left of the skull should be here. So here we're not going to follow this line. We're just going to state that from here we can begin to create our curve to this, right? So we didn't follow this line. from this point we try to connect this with a slight curve, and here you with practice you'll get this, the curve that you're looking for. So now we need to travel upwards and get to this area. So to get to this area, basically we just can understand that if you take the right coordinate here and divide this in half, this is the point where this should meet. So it's going to start curving up and meeting about here. This is where it stops, right? So now this gives you the flat area of the top of the skull. And that same formula, if you divide this in half, divide it again in half, this is where it stops curving. So you get that the slight flat area of the skull, and now it will start going downwards. So the next formula is that we need to figure out where exactly do we place the line to go down from here. So for this, we can state that if you divide this in half and also divide this in half again, and now divide this in half, you will get the angle to where the skull will start to come down from the top. Okay, so here you can also even get this angle, you know, if it has a slight angle, because the division for this is that you divide this in half, and if you divide this again, you can actually get that angle correctly. So here I divided this in half, then divided again, I got the point to where my point's supposed to be. And over here, so now I can follow this. So I'll raise this a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. A little messy there. Okay, so now we have this formula down, right? So from here, we now need to understand how do we connect this to this. Okay, so the formula for this is that we need to determine the angle first before we connect these two parts. So if you take this dot, the section from here, and divide it in half and divide it one more time, right, you will begin to get the angle to where this is supposed to go. And now we need to figure out this area here. Okay, and here is going to be a very amazing mathematical formula again. So if you divide this square in a diagonal line, right, as soon as you divide this in a diagonal line, and you also divide it like this, just like this. Okay, so as soon as you divide this in this diagonal line, okay, you have already figured out where the brow area for the skull is. So this is where your eyebrows will sit on top, right? And when you go down here, your eye socket actually comes at this angle. Okay, so we're not going to follow this line. We're just stating that once we come down, we can now understand that in the skull, in the actual bone structure, it actually goes inside. But for this, we can now just state that in order for us to understand the brow area, there's actually even a formula for this, which is if you divide this in half and divide it one more time, you will begin to get the angles for where the eye can be. So here we have this slight nudge here, and mathematically this is also correct because it actually goes out and then your nose comes here like this, but we're not drawing that out. Okay, so for us we'll just state that one in the center point is where it ends, and we can now just make it look like so. Okay, so the other item that we need to do is that slight mark that's on the skull, and for this the formula has always been that from the center you can start going in this direction. This is just the way the skull is made, and for this the formula is if you divide this in half one more time, you will get the point for where this actually needs to go. And this has to come over here. So all these formulas exist in real life. And I'll just finish this off like this, okay? So now we have the design of the skull. So now what I'll do is I'll take the pen, 20 minutes on this video, I hope I can upload this. I'll now mark this out with a dark pen, just to show you that using this formula we can figure out the design of the skull in real life. But this has become our invention by using this formula, right? So if you definitely want to look at this video over and just understand all the formulas that I showed you for this. Okay. So now when I take this eraser and if I started erasing this, right, you can see that the skull, the design of our invention makes sense. It looks like a skull because it's following the real life mathematical formulas that exist that Da Vinci had found himself. And we, by doing these angles, we're now discovering these as our inventions as to how we followed these rules out, and we can jot all these rules down in our study sheet. So in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this again and redo this whole thing again, because we need to simplify these formulas a little bit. So right now I went into quite a bit of detail, but we'll simplify this so they can imprint in our mind as to how much do we actually need to use them. And if you do your own research, you begin to understand the design of the human form. So here you can at least have an idea. Look forward to the next video. Hope you'll join me. Thanks.